Today we will take up 8th chapter from the book Many Worlds of Literature, and the title of the chapter is A Special Child, written by Uma Rao. This is an article in which we come to see the real life experience about the way the parents feel when they realize that their child is overtaken by some physical disability. The mother writes her feelings of depression and guilt and how she had hoped that a miracle would happen to cure the child. But the only way to cope with the situation was to accept the reality and set about acquiring the knowledge to understand the needs of the child. The article describes how she grew to accept her child as a special child. Before the birth of any baby, all dream and expect that they get a healthy baby. But most parents, their dreams are not fulfilled, and their joy and excitement is turned to depression when they come to know, or when the doctors diagnose some visual impairment. And the writer says that the typical reaction of parents differ from each other because the feelings, the emotions, they are all personal, but the impact of blindness upon the family members is tremendous due to demands made in terms of time, energy, and feelings which are puzzling and difficult to express. The author further writes that some parents learn of the impairment soon after the child is born. In another case, parents take their children home from the hospital assuming that everything is fine, but after several months and weeks, they begin to realize that there is something wrong, and at last their suspicions are confirmed by a doctor's diagnosis which shatter their dreams. And the author says she also learned about her son's visual impairment when he was a year old. The kind of feelings that she had in response to the child's visual impairment were confusing. She had the feelings of shock, helplessness, fear, denial, depression, grief, anger, disappointment, uncertainty, etc. But as the time went by, a lot of these things changed, and still hurts that she didn't have the questions all the time. She had learned that there are no stock answers that help to go around, and she learned that there are so many people who felt the same way as she did, and that she was not the only one. There were so many parents who had such disabled children, and her transition, her change from one state to another, a parent of a disabled child to a parent of special child, was a long journey. The period following the diagnosis of visual loss was one of many emotional ups and downs. Feelings changed from one hour to the next, and she experienced feelings of depression, and she did not want to get out of bed. There were times when she just wanted to stay under cover. She did not want to move into a day and get things done. It was hard to do even the routine things. Following this period came the time to search for a miracle cure. She went from doctor to doctor, thinking that they would make her son see. She listened to anyone and everyone dealing with the blind people, thinking that someone must know something to help her. Someone would surely treat her son. In addition, she had an overwhelming need to search for a reason during this time. The question why was always at the back of her mind, and was she to blame? She looked for reasons to explain her child's blindness. There were no satisfying answers which relieved the pain or diminished the feeling that life is not fair. Coming to terms with her child's visual loss was a gradual process, one which took different directions and a tremendous amount of time. She would never have believed that life could return to normal, but it did. The process of grieving and recovery is a very personal one. She got strength and weakness to the task of facing painful situation, and they are all personal ones. Besides her own grief, she had to face strangers at public places. Their reactions were very different. Some of the people were kind and meant well, while the others were just rude. There were friends and relatives and strangers who would say many different things when they learned that the baby is blind, but most often they feel at a loss, and their well meaning remarks may also seem awkward and unsympathetic. It was hard to talk about her special situation to people who had never experienced similar situations, although friends and relatives wished to provide comfort and support. They were uncertain about what to say or do. The hardest thing that she had ever had to say was, "My child is blind." On the other hand, she found that allowing friends and family to help her was a beneficial two-way street. Some of her daily responsibilities were lessened, and the people who cared were able to help her. In addition, meeting parents of other blind children was valuable. Sharing thoughts and experiences with people who have felt and have been through the same thing often provided reassurance. While time does heal and life does return to normal, she also incorporated a new way of thinking about blindness into her daily life. This, she thought, she would like to sum up in Barbara Chill's words that the real problem of blindness is not the loss of eyesight, the real problem is the misunderstanding and lack of information which exists. So she now looked at her child as a child first and then as a blind. She spent a couple of years with the child put in normal school where opportunities available to the normal children were denied to him, and society's overwhelming negative attitudes about blindness as helplessness, inferiority, dependency, and all these things which marked his life. She supposed that this is the reality where the story begins. She had no more, and now she moved to acquire knowledge, learn the alternative techniques which would help the child who was blind. And she decided that she should get herself trained as a teacher for visually impaired, and that objective was not only to help her own son but also thousands of other blind children like him to have a chance to lead normal lives with all their rights, privileges, and responsibilities that the rest take for granted. And she realized that with knowledge comes understanding, and with understanding comes the healing. So during her stay abroad, that is in the Northern Illinois University, during her training, one day her son left the apartment taking his cane, wanting to try his mobility skills, that he should move around. And when she returned home, she found that the apartment was empty. She was shocked and extremely annoyed with him. But the son arrived with his instructor, and her immediate reaction was that of anger when his instructor said, believe in the child's ability to be independent and give him every opportunity to exert it. This is when she realized that we can produce independent, competent, blind children if only we give them the opportunity to do so. So, her training not only taught her to be a teacher but also an effective parent. She learned blind children can learn the same concepts that are taught to the other children. The only difference was the method of learning. The blind children must make more extensive use of their other senses, as for example, they can use the sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of hearing, as for example, for the concepts such as big and small, same and different, shapes, number concepts, and others can be taught with concrete objects as an alternative to pictures on paper. And then comes the question, how does a blind child get around? These children will have to use many cues to find their way around. The sound can be a landmark. They quickly learn the story time area is carpeted, that the dress up area is next to the windows where they can feel the sun or hear the rain. And her son also uses the cane, knew the hard surface was the side walk and the soft area was the grass. So he maintained a straight line while walking and counting the number of blocks by the lamppost. Smell, temperature, sound can form other landmarks for these children. All children get bumps and bruises while learning to cope with groups of people. This is a natural and vital part of learning, essential to live in our society. So, encourage the blind child to mix up with sighted people. Skinned knees and tears form bumps, last a few minutes, but the negative effects of sheltering lasts for a lifetime. So even today she says that her son has problems of making and retaining friends. It is not that he is unfriendly, he just doesn't know how to mingle, how to mix with his friends and peers. My parents, or we see that so many relatives and families, they should say that like normal child, a blind child also needs firm but loving discipline so that he can learn how to get along in this world. And how is he going to read and write? The answer is that he can be taught through braille. The blind child can easily be taught braille by a specially trained teacher of the blind. It would be helpful to expose the child early in his life. At the last, the author submits that she had come a long way in her journey, and all she wanted to say is that she was a proud parent of a boy and she cherished him as he is a special child.